All right.
On a foggy Sunday evening in late November 1991, radios in kitchens, bedrooms, and idling cars all carried the same abrupt bulletin. Freddie Mercury was gone, 45, felled by a virus that society still discussed in whispers. Listeners who had fallen in love to Crazy Little Thing Called Love or belted Bohemian Rhapsody on youthful road trips felt a collective gasp ripple through the air, as though a powerful stage lamp had blinked out in the middle of a favorite song. Yet to understand why that silence hurt so fiercely, we must journey back to the warm, spice-scented streets of Stonetown in Zanzibar, where his spark first glowed. Picture narrow coral stone alleys dotted with lanterns, passing dhows bobbing beside the harbor, and the scent of cloves drifting under a sky-streaked pink by the Indian Ocean sunset. Inside a modest apartment above a textile shop, baby Farokh Bulsara heard two guiding voices, his mother Jair singing gentle Gujarati lullabies, and his father Bomi reciting British ledger figures with calm precision. Order met imagination in that single room, and the boy learned early that discipline could walk hand in hand with dazzling color. Adventure arrived at 8 when his parents placed him on a steamship bound for Bombay so he could attend St. Peter's School, a disciplined Anglican boarding academy. Thunderous monsoon rains rattled tin roofs while morning chapel hymns echoed through stone corridors. Yet the shy child gravitated toward a battered upright piano standing alone in a drafty hallway. There, he discovered that his slim fingers could create miniature storms of their own. He practiced until a passing choirmaster stopped, offered lessons, and soon pushed him toward public performance. Every afternoon, rehearsal turned into a secret vow that melody would become his passport beyond geography. Confidence mounted when classmates invited him to front a student group called the Hectics. They pounded out Cliff Richard covers between geometry recitations, sweat dripping under ceiling fans, while older students cheered and younger students beat desks in time. Applause landed like electricity, convincing Farokh that music held more promise than any arithmetic award. Back in Zanzibar, political tensions exploded during 1964, toppling the Sultanate and forcing many Parsi families to flee. The Bulsaras grabbed passports, a few heirlooms, and 2 suitcases of clothing before boarding a flight that pierced thick monsoon clouds and landed in wintry London drizzle. Culture shock arrived instantly, yet young Farokh found excitement in every unfamiliar storefront. He enrolled at Isleworth Polytechnic, then transferred to Ealing College of Art, where charcoal still lifes failed to hold his attention. Instead, he filled sketchbooks with fantastical crowns, lions and phoenixes, tinkering with lettering that felt more like stage signage than homework. Between lectures, he busked for coins near the tube, belting Little Richard shrieks that startled commuters from their morning haze. During one smoky basement gig, he locked eyes with guitarist Brian May and drummer Roger Taylor, 2 university friends performing under the modest title, Smile. After the set, Farokh marched backstage despite nerves fizzing in his veins. He proposed a bold alliance. He would join as lead vocalist, rename the act Queen because royalty never begs for attention, and call himself Freddie Mercury because even a marquee deserves chemistry. May and Taylor laughed at first, but they remembered the name the next morning, which proved its staying power. When bassist John Deacon arrived months later, the constellation was complete, though their bank accounts still hovered near zero. Rehearsals happened in a damp warehouse lit by buzzing fluorescent tubes that sometimes flickered out mid-chord. Money stayed tight. The band often rented studio time after midnight when hourly rates dipped, then rode the night bus home clutching reels that stank of cigarette smoke. Their debut single, Keep Yourself Alive, earned kind reviews but minimal airplay, yet Freddie simply redoubled his flamboyance, stepping on local stages in satin catsuits while whipping the microphone stand like a cavalry saber. Perseverance turned to breakthrough with the 1974 album Sheer Heart Attack, which revealed a sharper melodic edge and scored radio traction on both sides of the Atlantic. Those first headlining tours across Britain in late '74 and early '75 were a crash course in survival. The band traveled in a drafty Bedford van that doubled as dressing room, bunkhouse, and canteen depending on the lay-by. Freddie leapt from cold motorway laybys to overheated club stages, warming his voice with supermarket whiskey because proper vocal steamers were a luxury they could not yet afford. Every night he introduced Killer Queen with mock aristocratic bows, and every night the stage crew held their breath when Brian May's homemade red special guitar threatened to short out under leaky roof beams. Those grueling miles forged an internal telepathy. If the lights failed, the band knew exactly which joke Freddie would crack to keep the crowd cheering until power returned. Japan fell hardest for that charisma. When Queen landed at Haneda Airport in April 1975, thousands of fans, most of them school-age girls in handmade satin jackets, filled the arrivals hall chanting, "Freddie!" Security whisked the bewildered musicians into taxis, yet the convoy crawled because admirers lined the motorway all the way into Tokyo. Freddie tasted sushi for the first time, began collecting ukiyo-e prints, and learned enough phonetic Japanese to thank arenas personally during encores. The polite hysteria convinced him that music need not share a language to share heartbeat. It also paid for the lacquered antique screens that would later decorate Garden Lodge. Longer tours followed, forcing the band to learn how to survive punishing schedules with little sleep and constant equipment mishaps. Then came the summer of 1975, when they threw every remaining pound into a 6-minute suite called Bohemian Rhapsody. Producers warned that radio refused songs longer than 3 minutes, but Freddie insisted listeners would cherish risk more than sameness. When the single hit airwaves, it spread like wildfire, its choral harmonies, thunderous guitars, and operatic sidestep feeling as fresh as a newly discovered color. Bohemian Rhapsody dragged the album A Night at the Opera to the top of charts worldwide. The tour that followed introduced audiences to Freddie's next fashion chapter, glittering leotards one night, flowing velvet the next, always paired with ballet-like strides across the stage that defied traditional rock masculinity. Stadium shows demanded anthems, and Queen delivered with "We Will Rock You" and "We Are the Champions," two call-response giants that turned entire crowds into rhythm sections. Parents stomped beside teenagers and discovered common ground in 3 simple beats that rattled bleachers and bridged generation divides. Back in Europe, the follow-up sessions for A Day at the Races and News of the World revealed a band willing to cannibalize its own success, rather than repeat it. Freddie wrote "Somebody to Love" after binge listening to Aretha Franklin records, stacking 100 vocal tracks to mimic a gospel choir. The tape reels nearly snapped under the weight. Later, while Brian and Roger argued over tempo in a side room, Freddie wandered to the piano and began sketching a slow, anthemic hymn. "I've paid my dues," he muttered, as if reading a ledger of every motorway breakdown. 2 hours later, "We Are the Champions" existed, a self-portrait of bruised perseverance disguised as victory lap. The funk laced. Another One Bites. The dust extended the band's footprint into dance clubs. Its bass line grew so iconic that sports arenas worldwide adopted the chant for victory celebrations, giving Freddie a phantom presence in basketball gyms and hockey rinks decades beyond the single's release. Yet curiosity sometimes outran commercial caution, and Hot Space in 1982 proved it. Infused with funk, Latin percussion, and synth horn stabs, the record baffled conservative rock radio in the United States, even as dance clubs from Milan to Manhattan spun Body Language past midnight. Freddie shrugged at the mixed reviews, laughing that critics could never forgive musicians for dancing. The backlash did, however, steer Queen off the American highway for several years, a self-exile that later made their triumphant return at Live Aid feel like stolen thunder reclaimed. Global dominance required new frontiers. Early 1981 saw Queen land in South America, where 70,000 fans packed Buenos Aires' Vélez Sarsfield Stadium until the concrete trembled. 2 weeks later, 130,000 Brazilians filled Morumbi in São Paulo and clapped "We Will Rock You" so fiercely that nearby seismographs recorded tremors. Freddie later admitted those evenings proved music could transform strangers into a single breathing organism. Back in London, his look evolved again. Hair cropped close and a sharp mustache added. White tank top, faded jeans, and Adidas sneakers replaced sequins, yet somehow felt equally regal. Photographers captured this new aesthetic, which dared to blend rugged economy with camp confidence. And fashion critics still cite the shift as a masterclass in brand reinvention. Creative restlessness led Freddie to Munich's Musicland Studios, where late-night sessions birthed Mr. Bad Guy in 1985. Salsa horns, disco beats, and honest lyrics about heartbreak filled the solo record, proving he refused to sit still even when Queen was between albums. Rest did not last long. That same year, he invited David Bowie to experiment in a Swiss studio, and the impromptu jam produced Under Pressure in only 24 hours. The track's relentless bass pulse and soaring duet vocals became another global anthem, and a haunting window into two fearless artists pushing each other higher. Meanwhile, Los Angeles beckoned with a chance to collaborate with Michael Jackson. Sessions began with excitement, but soon disintegrated under mismatched schedules, pet llamas wandering corridors, and the powdery temptations of the decade. State of Shock languished unfinished, serving as a reminder that raw talent does not always guarantee productive chemistry. Then came Barcelona, a dream that paired Freddie's theatrical belt with Spanish soprano Montserrat Caballé's crystal high notes. Their duet captured the grandeur of an Olympic ceremony long before organizers chose it as the theme for the 1992 Games. Watching the recording footage reveals Freddie bowing in reverence yet still daring to match her altitude, an image of humility woven with courage. Live Aid arrived on July 13, 1985. Queen's 20-minute set at Wembley Stadium, slotted between giants like Elton John and Paul McCartney, would later be voted the greatest live performance in rock history. Freddie danced along the narrow runway, shouted "Ayo" into the summer sky, and heard 72,000 voices return the phrase note perfect. Even jaded roadies confessed goosebumps. 12 months later, the Magic Tour peaked at Nebworth Park in August 1986. 60,000 fans waving Union flags while fireworks hissed overhead. Freddie, in his bright yellow military jacket, guided the final encore of "We Are the Champions" with raw gratitude in every note. No one present knew it would be his last full concert with Queen, but audio recordings reveal a softness hinting at farewell. Offstage nightlife remained relentless. Parties spilled from limousines into nightclubs where champagne fountains mingled with bowls of illicit powder. For every notorious party, there was an equal and quieter act of generosity. Freddie paid Christmas Day hospital bills for stage crew relatives he barely knew, slipped envelope bundles to the widowed cleaner who polished his hallway mirrors, and hand-wrote encouragement letters to a teenage fan battling leukemia, letters the family still reads aloud every anniversary. Friends recall that he phoned confined AIDS patients under aliases just to chat about music and cats, then wired funds to replace the anonymity he borrowed. Lavish spending, he argued, had little point unless it left a warmer world behind it. Friends recall laughter flipping to sharp silence when paranoia surfaced, an intensity that mirrored the high notes he demanded from his own vocal cords. Early 1987 delivered brutal private news. Routine blood tests confirmed Freddie was HIV positive, a diagnosis that carried heavy stigma and limited treatment options at the time. He chose tight secrecy, confiding only in bandmates and a protective inner circle while halting large-scale tours. Recording became lifeline rather than luxury. The Miracle sessions showcased layer upon layer of stacked harmonies, an attempt to outrun the ticking clock. Titles like "Was It All Worth It?" hinted at private reflection, yet the public read the songs as typical theatrical bravado. Innuendo followed in early 1991. Lyrics spoke of sand slipping through fingers and painting pictures before time fades, metaphors listeners would only comprehend fully after his passing. Studio days grew shorter as fatigue set in, but Freddie pushed until blood vessels bulged at his temples, refusing to sing any line sitting down. Beyond the Studio Garden Lodge became a safe harbor. Inside the ivy-covered Kensington mansion, Freddie arranged antique Japanese screens beside Art Deco lamps, and 8 adored cats roamed hallways like furry chaperones. He telephoned home from foreign hotels to speak their names, proving affection extended well beyond center stage. Mary Austin, the unwavering confidant from pre-fame days, remained at his side. Freddie called her his common-law wife, bought her a nearby flat, and later left her control of his estate, plus the crucial task of scattering his ashes. Their bond stands as testament that romantic love may fade, but soul-level loyalty can last forever. Jim Hutton, the Irish hairdresser who entered Freddie's orbit in the mid-'80s, offered domestic stillness after the stage's thunder. They spent evenings watching soap operas, drinking tea, and pruning roses in the garden. Cameras never caught those moments, yet they nourished him more than any red carpet event. June 1991 saw the filming of the video "These Are the Days of Our Lives." Freddie wore a silk waistcoat, clutched the microphone stand, and whispered the closing line, "I still love you," with visible effort. The tenderness of that line owed much to the way the clip was shot. Director Rudy Dolezal kept the lights soft, framing Freddie's face in close-up so wrinkles and weight loss were obvious yet unashamed. Between takes, the singer joked that if his makeup melted, it would at least match the lyric. Roger Taylor later confessed that the words, "I still love you," felt like a personal goodbye the moment they left Freddie's lips. Watching the raw footage today is like standing in a quiet cathedral where a single stained glass window catches dusk, fragile, luminous, impossible to forget. Bandmates later admitted they could barely watch his frailty, yet marveled at the strength inside the eyes. 2 months later, he ventured into the Rose Garden for one final stroll. Jim lifted a compact camera and captured the image of Freddie in a loose blue patterned shirt and pale trousers, a cat weaving between ankles, and a half smile both fragile and defiant. That photograph now graces countless magazine spreads, framing dignity against impending dusk. Autumn's chill carried pneumonia. On Saturday, the 23rd of November, 1991, he dictated a public statement acknowledging he had AIDS and urging supporters to fund the battle against the disease. The next evening, at 6:48, with Mary's hand in his and Jim stroking his hair, Freddie Mercury exhaled one last measured breath. News bulletins raced across time zones. Candlelight vigils flickered outside Garden Lodge while radio stations spun non-stop Queen. Letters of condolence arrived from presidents, pop stars, and ordinary listeners who felt they had lost a daring older brother. A private Zoroastrian funeral followed, flames flickering in accordance with his faith's emphasis on purity of fire. Press helicopters hovered above the cemetery but never glimpsed the ceremony, shielded by high walls and staunch friends. 4 months later, Wembley reopened for the Freddie Mercury tribute concert for AIDS awareness. Metallica thundered, George Michael rediscovered Somebody to Love, Elton John shared the piano bench with Axl Rose, and 1 billion viewers around the globe donated money that founded the Mercury Phoenix Trust. To date, the organization has funneled tens of millions into research, transforming grief into tangible survival for countless others. 2 years after his death, Queen's surviving members returned to the studio to finish Made in Heaven, weaving Freddie's final vocal takes into new arrangements. The album debuted atop European charts, proving audiences still craved that velvet roar even when delivered from beyond the veil. Freddie's influence reached further than music. Fashion archivists credit him with normalizing gender-fluid stagewear long before the term entered mainstream vocabulary. Drag performers revere his ability to marry masculinity with glitter, and stadium architects still design runways modeled on the Live Aid blueprint. LGBTQ advocates cite his life as pivotal to destigmatizing AIDS conversations in the early 90s. By publicly acknowledging his illness, he forced tabloid sensationalism to confront real stakes and encouraged governments to increase funding for research. Young singers study his range and phrasing, while veteran rock vocalists admit that no one since has matched the timbre that could flip from operatic baritone to laser-precise tenor in a single breath. Documentaries dissect his breath control, yet the technical analysis never fully captures the emotional wallop that surged through loudspeakers when he invited an audience to harmonize. Fans who first bought Queen vinyl on release day remain devoted, now sharing those records with grandchildren who stream music on phones. The stomp-clap rhythm of We Will Rock You echoes in school gyms worldwide, ensuring every generation meets his legacy before most know his name. Ultimately, his story teaches that boldness, vulnerability, and relentless creativity can coexist within the same heartbeat. He refused to let background dictate ceiling. He fused opera with rock without apology, and he treated personal joy as a right worth defending. Today, if you press play on Somebody to Love during a late drive, the melody still lifts the darkened highway. If you cue fat-bottomed girls while frying breakfast, the kitchen becomes a miniature arena. Each chorus lights the power that slipped briefly into silence on that cold November night, yet never truly extinguished. Therefore, remember the shy Zanzibari boy practicing piano while monsoon rains slammed shutters, the fearless showman waving a crown at Wembley, and the gentle friend whispering to cats beneath Kensington roses. They are all the same soul, reminding us that ordinary boundaries crumble when passion leans into purpose. So take a breath, raise an imaginary microphone, and let the chorus fly, because legends do not retire. They hand the next verse to whoever is brave enough to keep singing. Freddie Mercury handed it to you.